Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. This is my dad, Ted.
Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Knightsky. Well, today I have a special guest with me, and I'm pretty excited to have this conversation and share it with you with my good friend, Bob. Bob Vajgrt is an architect, a pilot, and now an author. My relationship with Bob goes back decades, actually 2 decades. Bob and I actually worked together to design and have a school built. And in that process, we became quick friends because we've got very different personalities. And that's what's amazing about Bob. In the interview, I say Bob is just an ordinary guy. And that's what is so exciting about him, because in his ordinariness, he is actually an extraordinary leader, because he just goes about his business with humility and kindness and compassion. His 2 books are The Story in Your Head, which is a leadership text, and his second book is called Along for the Ride, which is a children's book. In our conversation here, you're going to hear Bob's philosophy on leadership. You're going to have a good understanding of his approach to teaming and design, and you're going to learn a little bit about pizza and why he thinks he might look like Superman. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. Today I've got an old friend of mine. Not that he's old. Well, he is old, but he's not that old. Bob Vajgrt, who is an architect, retired, but a leader and a great guy. And he wrote a book called The Story in Your Head: How Life Experiences Prepare You for Leadership or Not. And that's my favorite part of the title. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Ted, thanks. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate you sharing the book with your audience and allowing me to come on and share my story.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic book. And when you sent me the transcript, what I really like about the text, Bob, is, and again, knowing you, I just like how you come through in the book for the genuine human being that you are. And, you know, your values weave through the entire text. But what I really appreciate about this, and this is where we're going to get to know you, is that you're a relatively ordinary man. It's not like you're president of a company or the governor of whatever. You're a leader. And on our podcast, you know, Buffalo Leadership is anyone who has influence over another person. And the book puts you in an extraordinary position to influence others. So let's start out with what made you want to write. What made you want to write the book?
Boy, that's interesting. So throughout my career, I'm an architect, mainly managing projects. And as I managed projects, I noticed that there was a gap. There's books out on managing people, leading people, but the gap was, how do you do that by leading and managing from who you are? There's a lot of textbook kind of books that outline that information, and I thought I had something different to offer from a story standpoint. So I had mentioned this to a person that I worked with closely, Megan Kachi, and she said, yeah, maybe you should write a book. And when I stepped away from architecture a couple of years ago, she sent me a note. And she said, hey, Bob, now that you've got this newfound time on your hand, maybe you'll have time to write this book. And I thought, yeah, I should write this book. So I started writing a book. And what I really was focusing on was project management. But as I got into it, what I found out was it's more about leading from who you are. And how did you become who you are? And how do you take those life experiences and share them with other people and help them grow in ways that you've grown through the life experiences that you've had? And that was the point in the writing where I just kind of deviated a little bit from the project management and really started to focus on the leadership aspect. One thing that I do talk about in the book is leading from where you are and who you are, understanding who you are, from your morals, your beliefs, your life's vision, what do you want to accomplish? And I think all those are important to have and to understand before you can lead somebody else. So that's kind of where the book came from.
And let's just back this up for a second. Let's talk about your formation as a person. Because again, you started, and we'll get into your whole career here in a second, but tell me where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to elementary school, middle school, high school, college? Like, what's that journey? What was little Bobby Vajgrt like?
Little Bobby Vajgrt. He was he was a quiet person, actually, pretty shy, I would say, an introvert. But yeah, I grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, small town. Grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. I consider myself a baby boomer, not a Gen X, just because of the way I view the world and I view just kind of myself. Oshkosh at the time was not really diverse. It was a kind of a normal Midwest town of the 60s. It was small enough where we could, ride our bikes around. Our parents gave us a lot of freedom to do things and kind of explore boundaries by ourselves and understand where our boundaries were, kind of set them on our own. It was a great place to grow up. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I consider Oshkosh the mecca of aviation. So aviation is kind of in my blood as well. It was nice. We would ride our bikes to places, which, kids don't do that as much anymore. They're not necessarily living in walkable locations. They can't go visit their cousins or their friends on their bikes. I had two sisters. I'm the middle child. I'm one on each end. And my father was a firefighter who eventually turned into a fire inspector. So again, growing up in Oshkosh, was about 50,000 people at the time. My dad knew pretty much everybody because he had to go in all these businesses. Yeah. And talk to them. So it's kind of like somebody knows somebody that knows my dad. So I had to be careful on what I did, again, kind of setting boundaries. My mom was a stay-home mom. She did go to a school for beautician, but basically quit when she had kids. Our schools were very close to our home. So I walked to school. When I was a kindergartner, I walked to school. We walked probably a quarter mile to school. My middle school was relatively close.
Which elementary school did you go to in Oshkosh?
So I went to Franklin.
All right.
Franklin, Perry Tippler, and Oshkosh West.
Yeah. Okay. So you lived kind of in the center of Oshkosh.
Yeah, right off of the freeway. And it's interesting, going back to the walkable and bikeable community. At the time, there weren't any overpasses, so we would cross Highway 41 on our bikes, which nowadays is an interstate. It's a 6-lane interstate.
In the 80s, we called that Frogger.
Right. So, my family was, kind of the blue collar worker. My older sister ended up going to a tech college, and I was the only one at the time that went to a 4-year university. And I had some influence on my younger sister and told her that, she needed to go to a 4-year university just to allow for more opportunities with what she wanted to do. My grandparents, my grandfather in particular, came over from Germany. My great-grandfather was in the Austrian army, which is interesting. So when my grandfather came over, he would always talk to me about his trip over and eating potatoes for like a month to get over here. And he's like, I'm never going to eat another potato again. So, I learned a lot from my grandparents and my parents, just kind of as a supportive community person, supporting other people, putting other people first, kind of that service leadership, if you will. It was just kind of ingrained in our entire family. I saw my uncles and my aunts doing that, my cousins doing that. And it was just something that God instilled at me at an early age to be, kind of that servant leader and help others to do the things they wanted to do. As far as teachers go, I had a 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Pauley, and I call her the creator of the makerspace. I thought this was so cool. So back in the day, they used to have these huge movable walls between classrooms, and which most of the time they never got opened. They just stayed closed. But this teacher, hers was open all the time, and she had both rooms. One room, she had built a log cabin, one that you could actually walk into. Yeah, it was built out of old carpet tubes, cardboard carpet tubes.
Oh my gosh!
It had doors, it had windows. She had, so much on display as far as like nature things like beehives and animals and things like that. It was just so cool. And that really kind of exposed me to nature in general, and then just kind of the history of Wisconsin. A couple other teachers, Mrs. Lloyd, she was my 5th grade teacher. She probably had the biggest impact on me, and just about a month ago or so, she passed away, and I went to her celebration of life and had talked to her brother and kind of passed on some stories. But one thing that she always instilled in me, so I was not a great student. I was probably a C average student. But one thing that she always instilled in me was she believed in what I could do. She supported what I could do, where I was at, not necessarily telling me, you got to get an A, you got to get an A. She saw where I was at, and she helped me build on that. She wasn't necessarily putting me down. And that unfortunately doesn't happen with all teachers. But Mrs. Lloyd was awesome at that. Some other teachers that I had, were art teachers that I thought were excellent at helping us kind of discover our creativity as well.
And any art teachers stand out for you in high school, middle school?
Yeah.
I mean, you go into creativity, architecture, you're an introverted little guy. School's kind of like it's here.
Right. Mr. Miller was my drafting teacher, and he was awesome. He would, if you wanted to do something, he helped you figure out a way to do it. It was a lot of fun in there. He would give us direction, and then he would give us the leeway and the time to get it done. He wouldn't, look over your shoulder and tell you how to do it. He would let you discover the ways to do it. Very, very supportive. Mr. Lazinski, he was an art teacher that I had in high school. Same thing. If, art class gives you the ability to create something that's never been created before, which is really cool. The assignment is to create something out of clay. Okay, well, let's do that. Well, what is it going to be? I don't know. I haven't seen it before. And you just start creating this thing. The only rule with clay, though, Ted, is the clay has to be thin. If the clay gets thick and it gets air bubbles in, it's going to explode in the kiln.
Yeah.
And it's going to take out all of your classmates.
Just for context, what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 1983.
Okay, so late enough that you're not making what a lot of creative kids were making in the kiln with their one hitters and everything else. That
right,
yeah, those you find those at rummage sales all of the time now. Like, oh, it's art. Like, no, I know what that is.
Right. Yeah.
I want to back up a second to Mrs. Lloyd and because so many of the listeners are in education. I love that you went to her funeral. And I have that shared experience. You had her in 5th grade, and my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Hummerding, was really instrumental in just getting me to remember that I had worth. Because I had, in 2nd grade, I was evaluated for special ed. And it was all behavioral. I couldn't sit still. I was born caffeinated. You've been around me enough.
Really?
And they were like
surprising, Ted.
Yeah, right. They're like, he can't learn, he can't read, he can't. And then I get this teacher, Mrs. Humberding, who's like, well, this little guy needs love and structure. And Mrs. Humberding stayed in my life. I would run into her at the grocery store when I was in college, and she'd be Theodore Knightsky. She remembered me, and I was a towhead in 3rd grade, and I hadn't had blonde hair since 6th grade. But every year at a little local festival here called Fish Day, I would see her at one of the beer tents, and I'd always polka dance with her. And what was interesting is at her funeral, when I got to her funeral, her children, who were older than me, I said, "Hello, I'm Ted Knightsky. I was one of your mom's students, and she's just one of the loves of my life." And they're like, "You're the polka guy." She talked about you all the time, because after her husband died, she had nobody to polka with, and I would always find her. And frankly, Bob, I had a few beers in me, and I was like, I think I'm going to go dance with Mrs. Humberding. And then all of a sudden it became a tradition until she was no longer there. But point is, I really appreciate you bringing her up, because the instrumental people in our lives who form us are often forgotten, and the majority of them are teachers and coaches. So I really value that you brought them up.
Yeah. Well, I had a similar experience. I had another teacher, I'm not going to mention the grade, in elementary school that kind of the same thing. I was not a great student, and it was almost, I was being punished for that, for not being a better graded student. And when I got in Mrs. Lloyd's class, that was not the case. She, was caring about me as a person, trying to educate me where I was at and help me kind of find my way to learn, which was really neat. I had never had a teacher like that before. And same thing, I would run into Mrs. Lloyd now and again. She showed up at a few weddings with friends of ours. She would send me Christmas cards until probably about 10 years ago. I think she was about 90 something when she passed away. So, after a while, the cards stopped coming. But it was just really neat to stay in contact with her.
Well, I firmly believe in my heart, how someone makes you feel is how you form. Mm-hmm. And you formed into a pretty darn good guy, Bob. So you go to college. You go to school where?
So my original plan was not actually to go to college. My whole career, it's funny. People will ask other architects, when did you want to be an architect? And they'll go, I always wanted to be an architect. For me, architecture wasn't necessarily something that I was thinking about doing. I wanted to problem solve, but I thought I would do that as a detective, a police detective. So my original thought was to go into the service, become a military police and MP, and then come out and be a police officer. So I tried to get into the service. They didn't want me. They didn't take me. I had a medical issue when I was 3 years old. And they kind of flagged it and said, just have your doctor send us a note. And I thought, I'm not so sure this is for me. So I ended up going to Fox Valley Tech in Appleton for police science for a year. Again, thought after a year, I'm like, I don't think this is for me. And about that time is when I met my wife, Dawn, and she said, maybe you should just go to college and take some classes and see what interests you. Well, Ted, I never actually took any entrance exams, any ACTs for college because it was never on my radar. I hadn't planned on going. So after that, I went to UW-Vajgrt for a couple of years, took a drafting class there, and I thought, maybe I'll look into architecture because Mr. Miller, again from high school, instilled this kind of creativity in architecture in me, and I thought that was kind of cool. Ended up going to UW-Milwaukee and getting my degree there, and then working at a few different firms within the Milwaukee area. So basically, the career of architecture brought me to Milwaukee, which is where I reside now.
So we're going to get into your book here, but this is like the third nudge that you have brought up. And I think it's an important piece that kind of comes out in your book is people need to pay attention to when other people see something in us that we don't necessarily think about, right? You're minding your own business. You think you're going to be a police officer, which, by the way, as someone who's known you for a couple of decades, I didn't know that. And boy, I wish you'd have pulled me over because I would have been like, hey, what's going on? You'd have been the nicest law enforcement guy on the planet. But these nudges, Bob, in your life that come up, because there's something called the nudge principle where leaders are unintentionally steering people through both coaching, candor, and kindness into other spaces and places. And you pepper this throughout your whole book, not using that word, but just like, and then this person, because there's a story towards the back about a school system, Sheboygan Falls, and the superintendent, and how you just acted as her courage partner. So getting into the book, because again, the story in your head is a great, number one, it's a great line. The way you frame it, it's in the positive, because many times it's framed in the negative, like, I've created the story in my head and now I'm death spiraling into anxiety.
Right.
But you start out your book, and I love your formula. And again, it reads like a man who managed projects his whole life, because you write the book like, I'm going to manage your leadership with you. So you start out with chapter 1, You Defined is the name of the chapter. Talk to me, Bob, about what your values and beliefs are and why those are so important for you, both as a leader and a man. in life and leadership?
As I started in my career, one thing that I noticed was, the people that were leading me were saying things and doing things and not necessarily meaning them or following through. And that wasn't how I grew up. If somebody said something or if I said something, I followed through and I did it. And what I noticed was, going to that gap that I talked about, there's not a lot of talk about who are you and how did you become who you are, and kind of analyzing that and really deeply thinking about it. How did I become this person that I am, and looking for those lessons. So when I started to think about, through the years, who am I? How am I leading? How am I going to help others? It became really important to me to help define myself. And so you mentioned in chapter 1, I think I talk about, people taking time to define themselves. For me, it's really about that service to others, trying to help other people become who they want to be. But that's not saying that you're not necessarily concentrating on yourself, because you do need to work on yourself as well. But I think having those moral compass points and keeping you on the path really help you help other people. If you start to sway from who you are, and the other people that you're trying to help see that, they're going to say, well, why are you telling me to do this? You don't even do that. So I think it's really important to be able to define those things for yourself, and then I think you can help other people do it. So I think that's really important to me. As far as what those are for me, my beliefs, like I talked about, are really helping other people, being true to who you are, being respectful of other people. I've got kind of a list of things that I keep and kind of go through and look at, but I think it's important for people to just kind of think about it for themselves so that they can help other people.
I love that because, as a teacher, teachers are always looking for the opportunities to find shortcuts. And I have 4 core values, and they actually spell wise. And my first core value is wisdom. Just the constant seeking and understanding of like what's going on in the world around me, but then learning from it every single day. I love the quote, "You never lose, you always learn," because if you can't keep score in life like that. My second one is integrity, and you and I share that because you said that. I mean, if someone says they're going to do something, or if someone tells me and I loved at the beginning of your book how you talked about, everybody's just working themselves to a nub, and they're not even worried about the customer. They're worried about profits and becoming partners and all these other things. I got to get out of here. Mm-hmm. Integrity is when somebody says like, here's what we do around here. But then if I don't see it, like I feel really icky. Mm-hmm. And then I also believe fully in, if I give you my word, I'm going to keep it. The S we share too. Mine is service. And then the E for me is excellence. And not that I expect it, but I'm just constantly pursuing it, because on that road, I know I'll never achieve it. But if I just keep aiming for this, doing things that are right and best, it's just powerful. And I just always encourage people to reflect upon that. And that's why I like how you framed the beginning of the book of like, missions are real, visions are real, values are real. And if you work in an organization where they're not, you don't say it, but like people should get out.
Right.
Because, I always say, I'm looking at Bob Vajgrt 1.0. Ted Neitzke 1.0. There isn't a 2.0. So why in the world would we allow this one to be so disruptive? Mm-hmm. Which leads me to your chapter 2. It is as it is supposed to be. That sounds like Greek philosophy. So you have this maintaining a creative mindset, be open to the unknown, get messy, the different parts of the book. But that was my favorite piece in there. Bob, what does that mean? It is as it is supposed to be.
So I worked with a guy, Jerry Briscato, awesome guy. The first time I met him, he was at the firm that I worked at. And the first time I met him and started working with him on a project, I thought, man, this guy's arrogant. He was telling people what to do, just kind of, in their face all the time. And I thought, man, what's up with this guy? But as I got to know him and I got to see how he led, he was pushing people to think differently. And he would always say, it is what it is. And so that's kind of a spin on the title of that chapter. But one thing that I learned from Jerry was always look at things from a different lens. And you talk about it a little bit too, as far as the 180, what are things that you can do differently to change the situation? And I think sometimes that story in our head, like you said, is a negative story. And we think, what are we going to do here? This is terrible. But Jerry would always look at it from the standpoint of, okay, well, here's the issue. How are we going to approach it? And he would frame it differently in a way that helped us see it in a positive light, not necessarily a negative light. So, whatever it is, that's what it is, and we're going to proceed. We're just going to figure out a way to do it. But he really helped me personally reframe a question or a problem in a positive light and come up with a positive solution. So one of the things that I wanted to look for here and talk about was that creative mindset and getting messy. As I got further into my career, I started to think about being a little bit more safe and not necessarily taking chances or doing things for the first time. And I went to a retreat where we started to talk about, who we are and what is the threshold that we're trying to get over. And we were to pick this, it's called a climber card. It has an image on it. I picked a climber card that was a stack of stones that hikers call a cairn. So I picked that and I started to think about what does that image look like. And the person that was directing us talked about, we're going to paint something representing that threshold. And I thought, oh man, I consider myself an artist, and here's me going to be painting in front of all these people. I have no idea what this looks like. But she said something, and she said, it's okay if it's messy. You can always go back and change it or turn it into something else. And I thought, wow, that's a really powerful thing to say. We can make mistakes. It can get messy. But at the end of the day, we can also change the image of it, the direction of it. We can leave it behind and start over. It's not the end of the world. We can get messy. So ever since then, for the last 2.5 years since I've stepped away, that's something that always resonates in my head is, it's okay to get messy. It's okay to, try something, not have it work, change direction, reevaluate, even stop. Say, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I will stop doing this. But that was kind of the whole thing with that creative mindset is, be creative. Don't worry about the mess that you might make. It might be a great mess. You don't know. But we should always go into things with that creative mindset on, how can I do this? How can I maybe do it differently? It's okay to make mistakes and come back to it and fix it. But have that positive thought that it will come out okay, eventually.
And I put a note in that chapter that I think a lot of us get kind of paralysis around risk taking as we age because we've seen so many things. So now we just try to create these kind of safe lanes of life to travel in. Exactly. And I love that you get re-inspired in that piece. She must have gone to the Bob Ross School of Art because that's right. That would be, we'll just put a little squirrel right there. But I too many people think that a mistake is permanent. And while there are permanent, there are choices that are permanent. Right. The majority of the time, how we respond to it is what's going to form our future, not the moment or the event. And that's what I really liked about that component. One of the other things I'm sorry, go ahead.
When I stepped away from architecture, one of the things that I always wanted to try was oil painting. But to your point, I was like, oh man, I don't know how the oil paints work. There's all kinds of medium that you can use in it. How, the type of brushes that you use, the strokes that you use, there's all this stuff just to learn to use the paint itself. So I never did it. And when I started to write the book and I started to think about getting messy, I'm like, I'm going to take up oil painting. I'm going to try it. So I did. And I kept thinking in my head as I was painting, If something wasn't right, I'll let it dry and I'll come back and I'll paint over it. It's no big deal. And again, I think if you have that mindset of, yeah, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to go back. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to take care of it. It'll be fine. Like you said, yes, some things are permanent. You can't fix them, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them you can fix. And having that mindset, at least for me, for the last couple of years, has really helped me try different things. Try things for the first time.
Yeah. And that, for me, that's, again, my metaphor for that is, so I'm a carpenter and I build stuff. Like I built all that stuff that you see in the background here. Yeah. And one of the things I learned in my formation as a carpenter was when you make a mistake, when you're building a cabinet or a piece of furniture, now you just have to add, right? So you have to like, okay, so now there's going to be a little molding piece around here, and it actually enhances, the piece of furniture or the material. And it's not the end. Some things can be sanded down in a way. Some things can be pit filled. Well, I was going to stain it. Now I'm going to paint it. Like you said. And I think what I love about this is I'm fascinated with art history. And whenever they x-ray paintings and they find out like the Mona Lisa is painted over another thing. You're like, yeah, they didn't want to waste the canvas. Now that's not true, but it's just as an example.
Right.
Yeah, and this is something, having worked with you, and we didn't share this, but you and I worked together when I was superintendent of schools and assistant superintendent, designing buildings. And friends, I have to tell you, like everything he talks about is actually the person he is. He's just like this. It's okay. I mean, one of my favorite memories of Bob is we got to spend 2 straight days, 8-hour days, interviewing teachers about what their ideal classrooms would look like. And hour after hour, Bob is trying to explain like creativity, and he's showing images to get people to think outside the box. And teacher after teacher came back and was like, I want a 20 by 20 room with my desk in the front and an overhead projector. And you're like, but we could put cabinets over here and we could put this over there. I want 20 by 20 and and it was so interesting just to see your resilience through that, because I remember at lunch being like, Bob, I'm done. This is crazy. And you're like, no, this is what we want. So that brings me to project management in your book, because again, while you take an architectural approach to this, the lessons in here are so powerful. And in chapter 3, I love this concept of be a management maverick. So like you, when I was young, I wanted to be something else, and it was Maverick. It was Tom Cruise, and I wanted to be in an F-14 Tomcat. But I couldn't pass the math part to get into the Navy aeronautics, but I was told I could be a navigator on a helicopter, so I walked away from that. So, all right, Bob, what does it mean to be a management maverick?
So, Ted, obviously you're a Top Gun fan. If you've seen Top Gun Maverick, in the portion where all the Top Gun pilots are sitting in the big hangar, the huge American flag in front of them, and there's a mission that they're going to talk about. Tom Cruise walks in. He's got this huge manual in his hand for their F-18 Hornet. He holds it up and he says, do you guys know everything about your plane? And they're like, you damn right we do. And he takes that book and he drops it in the wastebasket. And when he did that in the movie, I'm like, what is he doing? And I talked about it before. There's a lot of manuals out there on project management, but it's who you are. And that's what he says in the movie. He's like, we're going to find out who you are. What are your limits? And so when I talk about being a project manager maverick, I'm talking about managing by the way you are, not how you think you should be managing. And when you think about it, for me personally, it's caring about the people that I'm working with, truly caring about them, not saying, yeah, I care about you, but truly caring about them. And if you don't care about them necessarily as a person, trying to lead them, they're not necessarily going to follow you. And you see it in the movie, actually, if you watch it. The team starts to coalesce, they come together, they're caring about each other. Initially, they're kind of, their own individual team and not necessarily working as a team. But as they go through the process, they start to come together. And I've noticed that when you care about your team and they start to care about you, that's when that's where the magic happens. And that's where it comes in. So, be that maverick, be the person who you are. Don't do something because somebody's telling you to do it. Do it because you think it should be done and it's right. Quite often you'll be told as a project manager to do something and you're like, boy, I don't think I should do that. But you do it anyway. And all of a sudden your team's like, whoa, you're completely out of character. Why are you telling me to do this? And they start to lose respect for you. But if you stay true to who you are, that's when it coalesces and the team really starts to respect you. That happened to me a few times where, I was told as a leader to tell my team to do something. And I felt like if I did that, I was going to hurt my team. Again, going back to the movie, Tom Cruise is out on the beach playing football with his team, and his commanding officer comes up, looks at him like, what are you doing? These guys should be training. He's like, they're learning to be a team. And the guy walked away kind of upset, but he did it the way he thought he should do it. His internal values told him, this is how I can best do it. And I think if you lead that way, that's the way I lead. If you lead that way by who you are, not by what people are telling you to do, the outcome, I think, is better than doing it the other way. So, my advice is, it's not always that way. Sometimes you have to toe the company line, and I completely agree with that. But at other times, you have to go by what you think is right, and it might not be towing the company line.
Well, and that goes back to leadership and followership. This concept that we talk about, where my left foot leads me, my right foot follows. My right foot leads me, my left foot follows. That I have to be doing two things, because there is a mission and there is expectations, there are outcomes. But loving your people, Bob, is the way you describe it in there, is just, and again, it is who you are, and it's powerful. And some people will say, like, well, that's important to create loyalty. And it's like, no, there's a genuine nature to actually worrying about your people and ensuring that you set them up for success, because they're on their 1.0 version as well. Now, weirdly for me, Bob, my takeaway from Maverick was that Tom Cruise gave me hope that I can still get six-pack abs and firm pecs. But I'm glad that you took that part out of the movie. You're a better man than me. Tell me. I also love in this chapter the plan to succeed. That mindset.
Yeah. So, being the project manager, what I was always told is the project manager is responsible for the success of the project. So in my mind, I always had success buried in my head. What is success? Success is, for me anyway, it's based on the financial success of the project. It's based on the client being happy with the product that we gave them, the process that we went through. And are we, as a team, everyone, proud of the project? That, to me, defines success. So when I talk about, having that success and maintaining that, I started to think about, okay, if we're going to do these things, let's always set the expectation that we are going to make a profit. We're always going to make the client happy, and we're always going to be proud of the project. If you don't go into a project thinking those things, they may never happen. But you should always have the expectation of yourself that you are going to make those things happen. And I think that's the power of positive thinking. Having those positive thoughts, keeping them in the front, and always having that as a target. Will you always accomplish that? Probably not. But if you never have it as a target, I can guarantee you'll never accomplish it. So always have those things, whatever they are in your mind or your field, always have those in front of you as a goal. Those are the things we're going to accomplish.
So, Bob, when you're talking about process management, one of the pieces, again, just taking you to the book, is securing the perfect pizza. And I find in process management, there are like kind of three types of people. There are the people who love the process. Like I like the security of knowing that you want me to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's another type of people who see the process and they have to ideate off of it. Well, this would be another heavy thought of, and that's fine, input. And then there's a third type of person who's like, who made this? Where did this come from? Whose idea is this? This happens in education. I think it happens everywhere where there's like this really good plan by the person who authored it. And I've seen this in your work, Laura. Like you guys designed something, then the construction management team gets on board and they're like, we're not putting tubular steel. What moron? And then you guys are like, but it'll look cool. Right. And then,
right.
But walking through that process for everyone through process management and change and implementation, your metaphor of securing the perfect pizza, walk us through what that means.
Yeah. So I thought about this a few years back when we design a building, we've got a client and a lot of times it's a team. It's not necessarily one person. So on that team, you might have the superintendent, there might be a principal of the building, you might have some staff, some teachers, and they all have different ideas of what that school should be. And basically I took that whole idea and I put it into ordering a pizza. So you go out to a restaurant, you've got all these people sitting around the table and you're talking about what kind of pizza should we get? Well, there's tons of options, just like there are in buildings. You've got different options for crusts, for sauces, for toppings, everything. And you start to talk about it as a team and you're like, well, let's have this, let's do this. You kind of debate it and you come up with what you think it should be. You tell the waiter, and how many times, Ted, have you ordered a pizza and it's come to your table or your door and you open it up and you're like, this isn't the pizza I ordered.
Yeah.
So, the person... I always am amazed when those people come to the table, the waiter or waitress, and they come to the table and you tell them what you want and they don't write anything down. You're like, how the heck are they going to remember this? So we're ordering the pizza. The person maybe writes it down, maybe doesn't write it down. They go back, they tell the cook what they want, what the table wants. They put it together and it comes back out. The expectation is that the pizza is going to be what I ordered. And so when I talk about making the perfect pizza, it's having everybody on the team understand what is that going to be, and talking about it. What is the crust? Are we going to be good with hand toss? We want thin. Is it going to be, Chicago thick style? Whatever. What is that crust going to be? And then making sure that the waiter understands what that is. If I talk about anchovies, the first time I saw anchovies on a pizza list of toppings, I'm like, what is an anchovy? I had never had that before. And boy, if I had have ordered that, what a surprise that would have been on my pizza. Yeah. So, make sure that if you're ordering something, you're like, oh, I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds good. I'll throw that on there. Make sure you understand what that is. Ask questions about what is it that I'm ordering. Hey, you talked about this, but I don't know what this is. Can you explain that? And then as the customer, make sure that person understands what you're asking for. You may have said something that maybe the person you're giving instruction to doesn't necessarily understand. So they're going, well, I think they meant this. And then they go back and they do their work and they come back and they're like, here's your pizza. And you're like, that's not what I meant. So it's kind of that double check. You're ordering something. Somebody's taking the order. You're going to say, okay, this is what I ordered. And the other person's going to say, okay, this is what I heard. These are the things you want on your pizza. That way, the expectations, when that thing gets done, whatever it is, everybody's expectations are met. I've had project members say, well, you know what, the client wants this. And I think what would make it better is if we add, maybe we add that anchovy piece, because I really love anchovies, so I'm going to add that. I think they would love it. Well, maybe they don't love it, and all of a sudden they get it and they're like, what's this? I didn't order this. And that's not saying to ignore some things that maybe might help improve the product or the process or whatever you're doing. Offer those things up, but don't just automatically add it, because that may not be what they want. Again, the expectation is I've ordered something and that's what I want. But if that order could be improved and I say, hey, maybe we could do this, and they're like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do that. Great, let's go ahead and add it. So it's that ordering the pizza, understanding what I'm ordering, understanding the expectations, adding things if it makes sense, taking things off if it doesn't make sense, and then getting it and having the expectation met.
And I think that's a concept that too often people fail to remember is, fail to remember is the point. A lot of people have amnesia. They'll set in place targets, and then what comes back is exactly what they asked for. And then once they see it, they're like, oh. And then there are other people who use their life wisdom to say, I know they didn't ask for this, but let's throw in a little bit of this and see what happens. When I read that chapter, it was ironic because 2 weeks after you had sent me the manuscript, I was in Italy, and I thought of that title of Securing the Perfect Pizza. And the reason is because I was in a rush. I wasn't paying attention. We went to this unbelievably great pizzeria, and I looked down and I had just had a hankering for a sausage pizza. I had eaten all different types of pizzas and foods, and I was just like, I just like a cheese and sausage pizza. Okay. So I looked down at the menu really quickly. I have my Google Translate because everything's in Italian. And I was like, oh, sausage. Okay. So the guy comes up and I point to the number and he walks away. And pizzas in restaurants in Italy, they come out like when they're done. They don't plate everybody at one time like in the United States, right? So Charlie, my son, gets his pizza and it's just this beautiful looking margherita pizza. And Megan gets hers and it's just this beautiful pizza. And all of a sudden I see this waiter walk by me with a pizza, and I'm like, what jackass do you think ordered that pizza? It was a sausage and frites Vienna pizza, and that's what I ordered. But I saw it, Bob. It was a hot dog and French fry pizza. It was like for children, and he puts it down in front of me. He puts it down in front of me, and my son just looked at me. He's like, Dad, you did it again. You kind of rushed. Now, in this thing, was it the perfect pizza? Yes. And was it exactly what I asked them to do? Yes. And one thing, my leadership lesson from that was I have to live with the fact that these were all my choices along the way. Bob, it was the grossest thing ever. The French fries were unbelievable, but Vienna sausage is like uber garlicky hot dogs. That thing stayed with me for a good 12 hours.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Ugh. So friends, learn from this. Make sure that what you're ordering is right. And then when you get the results, you live with it and you modify.
Well,
okay, go ahead.
I have done the opposite of that, where I've added something that the client didn't want. This was early in my career, and that's when I kind of learned this lesson was, I think it would be better if we did this. Well, okay, now the client gets this thing and he's like, hey, I didn't order that and I'm not going to pay for it. And now me as the young architect is like, oh, well, I thought it would make it better. And, so there's a mistake that is made where you think it's going to make it better. The client doesn't like it. And now you are on the hook to pay for that piece. So that was the lesson that I learned. And that's what I try and, again, instill in other people by telling the story about the pizza and just kind of putting it in a way that people understand.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pivot because I want to talk about a couple of other things that have been very impactful as a result of who you are and what you've done. Bob, what was your favorite project? Because what I think is really cool in my life is, I drive past the building that you were the project manager on and I helped envision. And every time I drive past it, I get a little tingly, like, that kind of happened because I was part of it.
That's cool.
And like in my mayor role, when we do something, I drive past and I'm like, oh, that was my idea. And it actually happened. What's that like for you when you drive around and there are hundreds of structures that your name's on? And like, where do you go that it kind of fills you with pride as a leader of people and process?
Yeah, it's cool. It is cool driving around. So I've done projects all over the state of Wisconsin in cities all over the place. And it is cool to drive through and go, oh yeah, there's a building that I worked on. But for me, the architecture is kind of a byproduct of the process. I enjoy, and the way that I define the best project is, did we have fun on the project? Number one, did the client have fun? I want to have fun. I want to make sure that the client has fun. It should be a good process. Especially schools, they don't get built every day. There's no new schools being built,
Nope.
In communities every day. It's maybe once in every 25 or 50 or even 100 years. So let's make that process fun. Am I respectful, and is the client respectful of what we're trying to do together? There is an expertise that you have as an educator, I have as an architect. Do we respect each other for that expertise? Having an alignment of that, I think, makes it so much more fun. And so, you do a great job of asking us, the architect, questions and trying to understand what it is we're doing. So I think that's a major component as well, just being respectful of the knowledge that we have. And then I always think about the impact that the buildings have on everyone that uses them. There's the teachers, there's the students, but there's also the groups that come in afterwards, the people, the community. They're used as voting places. They're used as public meeting places for all kinds of things. These buildings have a huge impact. And I talk about schools in particular, that it should be a building that says something important happens here. It should be something that stands out. And, a lot of times when I would be in a community, I would hear, well, we had this old school and it was good enough for me, and so it's good enough for everybody else. Well, times change, things change. And if we are going to, and I'll stick with schools here, if we're going to say that it's important to educate our students, the building should look like it's important enough to have our students be educated there. So when I drive by a building and I see it, and I think about some of the buildings that I built kind of before, I'll call it the modern learning environment movement happened. We pushed for that for so long, and now we're kind of there and it's happening. But when they were just boxes lined up next to each other along a corridor, when I see those schools, I'm like, oh man, that's so sad that we couldn't do something different there. As compared to, you had mentioned like the Sheboygan Falls school that I'd worked on. I look at that school, I'm like, man, for generations, this school can change and be modified to adjust to whatever the pedagogy of the day is based on the way we built it. And driving by, it gives me this great feeling that we've made this huge impact for this community and the people that are going to use the building. So for me, I don't necessarily have one favorite project. I have the favorite processes, if you will. Some clients are better than others. I loved working with you on the project.
Oh yeah, list off the ones you didn't like.
No, let's not do that.
It's a short list, I'm sure.
Ted, I remember one of the first times we started to talk about the middle school, and we were sitting around and we were throwing out architectural terms. And again, this goes to how you kind of get into, boy, what does he mean by that? And we started talking about different glazing for the building and internal glazing and having some views inside so that people can see learning happen. And we had mentioned the term butt glazing, and you're like, whoa, we can't say that in a middle school.
No, you can't.
To this day, every time I'm in a middle school, going through a project and talking about glazing, I think about you and butt glazing, and I don't say it, but I'm like, oh man, I just start laughing in my head. But it's that process, and I think anybody that does anything really, to have it be enjoyable, you have to have fun. The team has to be respectful of each other. And then at the end of the day, are you proud of what you accomplished as a team? Those things to me make the best projects. And I've got tons of them that are best projects.
And here's the deal, Bob. That formula makes for the best classroom, the best team, the best school, the best system, the best organization. And I think that what I love about this is it serves as a reminder for us for our well-being that, listen, at the end of the day, this should be engaging. It should be enjoyable. It should be challenging. It should be tough. but we should overcome together because we've got each other's backs. And that's the formula of your whole book, and it ends with this idea of guardian angels and kind of watching over the people that you support and love. And we're running out of time here, but I still want to talk about a couple of other things because, my favorite thing, the irony of all ironies is you and I start working together when we were much younger. Mm-hmm. And, I'm a middle school principal at the time. And this is what you need to know about Bob, and it comes through his book as well, is he's intensely curious. And like you had just come from a conference. And when you said like the evolution of like even your own approaches in career, when you came in by us, you were such an advocate for natural light. You're like, we cannot create a learning space in this building that does not include natural light. And there were people who were like, wow, we could save a little bit of money by building these prison-like school, classrooms. And it's just, you say that, you order the perfect pizza, but you were there saying like, let's just remember sausage is pretty good. Let's not miss the sausage on this or whatever it was. And you did have this really positive influence. So what I want to do is, as we kind of close out here, is talk to me about the story of Sheboygan Falls, where you and the superintendent are firm in your values, and you coach her as well as yourself to maintain this, because then I love how this operates in 2025 for the Knightsky family.
Yeah, so I had been working with Sheboygan Falls for a few years, actually, and we got to a point where we were doing the design, and we talked about modern learning environments. One of the things that we do is we talk about a project charter, and we start to game plan. What are the goals of the project? And we jot those down. What are the guiding principles? And we start to put those down with our team, the client team. And the interesting thing was, as we talked about the learning spaces, they all talked about, being open, being flexible, having daylight, being able to connect, having different spaces for students that learn differently, small group spaces. And we came in with a design that addressed that. And as we started to look at it and talk about it with the staff, they're like, yeah, that's not going to work. We need to have, you talked about the 20 by 20 classroom. They started getting back into what I call a legacy classroom, where it was disconnected. There weren't these breakout spaces, not a lot of views in and out. And the meeting ended, and both Jean and I were just kind of sitting in the conference room, kind of with our heads hung low a little bit. And Jean looked at me, Jean Bourne, wonderful superintendent. I had an awesome time working with her. And she looked at me and she said, Bob, what do you think? And I stopped for a moment and I thought, okay, what do I tell her? Do I tell her that what her staff just told her is wrong and that we should do something different? Or do I follow along with the majority and just say, well, I think we can make some modifications and still make this work? So there was kind of this struggle inside me trying to figure out what's the best way to lead her. Do I bring her along in this new journey, or do we kind of stay the course? And I decided that it was important to, again, hold true to who I am and where they said they wanted to go. So I said, Jean, if we do what they want to do, you are going to end up with a legacy school that will be inflexible for the future. You are not going to have the breakout spaces that you want and that we talked about. And she looked at me and she said, I'm glad you said that, because we can't do what they want to do. We need to be futuristic in thinking. We need to be innovative in the way we're designing and teaching our students. So we started to think about, okay, how can we bring the staff along? And Jean did an awesome job of bringing the staff along. And she started to talk about, okay, well, you talked about this early on as being important, but now you kind of want to go backwards. Let's talk about how are you going to do these things in that space? And she kind of worked backwards in getting them back on track with where this new kind of way of thinking for learning went. At the end of the day, they were the ones that were really advocating for these spaces. And what's really cool about this school is it doesn't have a gigantic cafeteria that normal schools, kind of legacy schools, have. They've got what they call a river. And it's the concept of the river that runs through Sheboygan Falls. It was something that was important to them. It told the story of the community, and they wanted that to be in the school somehow, that idea of connection, how the river connected the community together. So Chris Michaud, our designer, came up with this idea of taking the river and bringing that into the building, not physically, but metaphorically, with the circulation space. That became the cafeteria, that became the breakout space, it became a meeting space, but it's all weaved within the building. It's not one big space. And I can tell you, it's interesting as the architect when I walk in and they have their first open house and people are walking around and I'm thinking, oh boy, do people like this or do they not like it?
Right.
And several times I would have people walk up to me and they're not necessarily smiling. And I'm like, oh boy, I think this is trouble. And they're like, did you design this building? And I'm like, well, I was the project manager and, my team did this. And they're like, this is awesome. My kid comes home from school. They love being here. They don't want to leave. It's something different, and it's welcoming for the students. So it's that whole idea of innovation, being innovative, and doing something that hasn't been seen before or done before.
I think the big lesson here is it's not just an architectural design or a project. It's not just in the opportunity to lead a team. Having the courage to step into the space to ensure that people do what they need to do for themselves, to hold them both accountable to their visions and help them grow is one of the best burdens of being a leader and a coach. And even if you're being paid or not, and like teachers, they do this all the time. Parents tend not to because they're afraid, they get a story in their head like you've talked about. And the beauty of you is that you're bringing these experiences into the context. So there's so many other things about Bob Vajgrt that the world needs to know. You barely touched on it in the book at all. But tell us, Bob, what's the other thing you have in common with Maverick?
So being that I did grow up in Oshkosh, the mecca of aviation, many of my friends were pilots, just for fun, and I would go out flying with them all the time, and I'm like, man, someday I want to be a pilot. And it took me until I was 45 years old when I first started taking flight lessons. And ever since then, I've been a pilot, so I fly for fun. And it's awesome. But it's those things that you start to think about, even like writing this book, you start to think about an idea and you're like, oh man, that'd be so cool to do. And a lot of people never act on it. And it's that chance, that thing that you haven't done for the first time that maybe you should. That I took that chance to become a pilot. And what I do with that now is I share it with younger folks. There's a program called Young Eagles. I take kids up flying, get them interested in flight. Being a pilot really makes you focus on the whole concept of how is this plane flying when I'm in the air, and make sure that it stays flying while I'm in the air. Yeah. You're just thinking about it. But there's all these things that go with aviation, just the situational awareness of what's happening around you, the wide lens of what's happening. And I relate that so much to what we do as leaders and individuals, just being aware, situational awareness, what's happening. Think about what's happening with your teammates. Is there something happening in their life that I should be aware of, or maybe something that I should help maybe ease a burden? Aviation has really helped me think differently about my leadership ways. I think in a really good way, actually.
Well, I've always believed that the job of a pilot is to ensure that gravity doesn't win. And you in the book and your life, Bob, it's such a great metaphor for who you are, because even the story of Gene in Sheboygan Falls and the different men and women and people that you have in the text, you're always pulling them to like another altitude. And it's a beautiful thing about you. And it's just, again, people, you need to read the book and and just learn and grow from him, because I started out by saying, Bob's not extraordinary. And what I meant by that was, he's not like a head of state. He's just like any of us, except that he has reflected cognitively on his impact on leadership as an ordinary person running teams and doing extraordinary things. But you stepped into a space where you had the courage to kind of write out my formula, leaving a great legacy. So I'm going to hit you with some questions here as we close out the podcast. And the first one is, if this song comes on, what song would change the direction of your day? You're having a bad moment. You're driving the car to the airport because you can't listen to music while you're flying. At least you can't tell us you do. And that was in Iron Eagles, right? That was the bad spin-off of Top Gun, where the guy would play music when he was out dogfighting. Anyways, digression.
What's your set in?
Yeah. He had the Walkman like strapped to his leg. Yeah, right. I'm glad we both saw that. Anyways, what's your 180 song? What's the song that changes your direction?
Hold On Tight to Your Dreams. Yellow.
Oh, that's a great song. That's a great song. Okay. Yeah. Your book sells. Somebody makes a movie. Who plays Bob Vajgrt in the movie? You do have like the best hair of any guy I know. So you gotta go large here.
I don't know. It's kind of funny because I like I said before, I would consider myself a quiet person. But I think about thinking maybe Vince Vaughn, although he's a lot taller than I am. He's kind of funny. He's kind of quiet.
That would be a good one.
Either that, or years ago, there used to be a show on TV with Lois Lane and Clark Kent.
Clark Kent, yeah.
Superman show. Well, it was Superman, but it was a different name.
Oh, and it was one of those weird WB.
Yeah, it was one of those. And there was a guy that kind of looked like me at the time. And
Superman?
So I just thought,
are you seriously comparing yourself to Superman right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to the next question. There's that quiet humility. Well, I'm with, the guy who played Superman. All right. So with that, Bob, you've got another book coming out here in a little bit. Can you quickly describe that?
I do. I have two books coming out virtually at the same time. It's called Along for the Ride. And it's a children's illustrated book. Alyssa Brown is the illustrator. She's out of Michigan. She is awesome. She graduated from MyEd in 2024, and we got connected last, I believe it was August or September. I love her illustration. She did an awesome job. But the story is about a father that takes his kids and other passengers to school from daycare all the way to high school, and the experiences that kind of happen along the way. And it's the realization the father has on the last day of school after he drops his daughter off that I'm not going to have anybody along for the ride anymore. And it's the realization that all along he thought he was teaching his kids things, when at the end of the day they were actually teaching him things like patience and understanding and discovery and empathy and things like that. So that book will be coming out at the end of August, and I'm really excited for that.
That is so cool. And I think that, that's just something about you. I took the advice of don't write two books at one time. So my second one is not coming out at the same time as the first one. But lastly, Bob, talk to me about what is larger than life. When I started writing the book, we needed to create a company. We were going to self-publish the book. And my wife and I talked about what should this company be? What are we going to name it? And so the name came out of a game that we play when we go on road trips with our kids who are grown up now, but we called it Larger Than Life. And we would keep track of all of the things, the objects that were larger than life. So if we saw a larger than life rooster or spoon, we would keep track of that. And so zoom ahead, I'm trying to think of what is the name of this company that we should create. And I asked my daughter, I'm like, hey, what do you think we should name this company? And I kind of told her what we were trying to do. We're trying to enhance self-esteem, confidence, and leadership through the sharing of life experiences. And she's like, Dad, you should call it Larger Than Life. And I'm like, that actually fits. Another nudge.
Yeah, if you think about it, the things that we do, the people that we touch and how we affect them goes beyond our life. It will impact other people. And I relate it to a drop in a pond. If you drop a drop of water in a pond, it creates ripples. Those ripples go out and they affect the shoreline. That person, that drop can be gentle and have a nice impact, or it can be a deluge and destroy the shoreline. So, kind of what kind of drop are you going to be? Ultimately, Ted, what we want to do with the company is, years ago, my wife and I had fostered my niece and my nephew. And we had them for about a year. And my niece aged out of foster care at 18. And what we discovered was there wasn't a lot of support for kids that aged out of the foster system. They were kind of, they turn 18 and they're done. All the support goes away if they're not home. And so we saw a huge gap. And for years and years, we've talked about how can we help? And the thought was, the purpose of these books is really to start to create that company and have a foundation that we can support organizations that help people like that, those that have aged out. There's a couple of organizations that we've talked to just about, how can we help you? So we haven't created the foundation yet. We're in the process of getting that done. But ultimately, we want to have the Larger Than Life Foundation that would support, like I said, young adults, probably 18 to 21, that have aged out of the foster care system. So we're trying to do something, again, larger than what we are and who we are, and have a bigger impact for our community and other people that maybe didn't have the opportunities that we had.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Mrs. Lloyd for keeping you engaged in education, making sure that you were curious and you maintained that, and share my gratitude towards you, Bob. We've done some pretty amazing things together for kids. And the fact that, your next chapter post-retirement is to share your wisdom in leadership through publication, to reinforce with families in the children's book, to be present. And then finally, my favorite part about us is, as I was reading the manuscript when you sent it to me, and I read about Sheboygan Falls, I look across the table and there's my son, who is an 8th grade social studies teacher in Sheboygan Falls. And he's in a classroom that you and your team designed. And it hit me hard, because it was like, this is just the beauty of life. I know the guy, I didn't know he did this. And now here's my son teaching in the state of the art, all glass walls on one side, bright classroom, flexible furniture. And my favorite part of this is that his grandparents really wanted to see the classroom. They were so proud that their grandson was a teacher like their mom and like their grandmas and their dad and their uncles. And they're walking down the hallway and they were blown away. They're blown away because they went to school in the mid-20th century, the early 20th century, and they're walking through this incredibly modern school, and they cried because their grandson got to be there.
Yeah.
So, now you extend your impact to all of us through your text. Friends, read the book. It's a wonderful story because it's Bob. It's like you heard in this. He's a quiet, humble guy, with the exception that he thinks he's Superman, but he's a pretty awesome human being. So, Bob, thank you for joining us on the Smart Thinking Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ted. I appreciate
it. So let's do some smart thinking. Describe how you can apply Bob's leadership principles to your own leadership. List the people in your life who would benefit from some of the concepts, ideas, and strategies that Bob has laid out in his book. And last, what would it be like to ride in the back of your car? That's it. That's the Smart Thinking Podcast. Hey, as always, thank you so much for listening, and please make sure to share this episode with others who would benefit from both Bob's knowledge and his creativity. Thank you to the Well Pennies for their awesome music, and thank you for sharing this episode with others so that I can help others help themselves grow as leaders. Finally, and as a reminder to you, make sure to go onto Amazon and find Bob's books. They are under his last name, which is Vajgrt, Robert Vajgrt. And the book is The Story in Your Head is his leadership text, which has an extraordinarily well-written foreword to it. I mean, the book's foreword really hooks you in there. And, well, it might have been written by me. And his children's book is Along for the Ride. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with my friend Bob. I'm going to have a series of these over the course of the year, and some of you had sent me notes like, hey, I thought you were going to release these in July. Well, it turns out Bob's books were coming out at a different cadence, and I wanted to make sure that we could talk about both of those things and you could get them both. So, as we head into our storms this week, let's do that with two things. Number one, a renewed energy that there are great leaders all around us who are quiet and humble and kind like Bob. And two, that you can do anything that you put your mindset to, especially if you just turn, face it, run to it, and go to it. Why? Well, we're buffaloes, and we're leaders, and we have influence over other people. And I hope that Bob's conversation with me has influenced you in some ways that you didn't really see coming.
Love, please bring your heartbeat, bring your silent song to life.
silent song